thank you for coming on the webinar today. I just would like to do a quick introduction. So today, the webinar is about business trusts in the Czech Republic. We are going to look into unlocking opportunities in the Czech business trust landscape. Just a quick introduction. I'm Kesa, Director of Trustee Services at PT Trustees in the UK, and I'm delighted to be your facilitator for today's session. So before we dive in, just a small housekeeping item. We have a dedicated Q&A session in the end. So if you can submit your questions at the time, and we'll do our best to address them. So now let's have a quick look at what we have in store today. We have Mr. James Turnbull, who is the Procurer and Advisory Board Member for PTT in Central and Eastern Europe. And he'll be talking about the benefits of trust account for APR SFNS members. And then we have Mr. Sudheer Sharma, who is founder, CEO, and trustee of PT Trustees. And he'll be talking about PTT in the UK and providing some insights into how trust accounts work in the UK. And so, of course, we'll wrap it up with Q&A sessions. So without any further ado, so I'll leave it with you, James, to start. Thank you.
Thank you, Gesa. I'm going to share my screen. And briefly introduce myself a little bit further. I've been working in the area of trusts in the Czech Republic for more than 10 years now, right back to the very beginning when trusts were introduced into this jurisdiction. And so far, almost all of the trusts, there are about 4,500 trusts in the Czech Republic, and almost all of those trusts are family vehicles. They're set up by families to solve problems for families. And there are not many trusts that are dedicated to business purposes. Now, when you compare that with the rest of the world, it's interesting because in the rest of the world, businesses or commerce uses trusts a lot. And the purpose of today is just to have a look at the potential, I think, for the same use of trusts in this country. And I'm hoping that my screen will now go to the yes. Like I said, this is a new thing. There is not a substantial base of business trusts in the Czech Republic yet. It's a very small market. Today, we do not promise to give you all of the answers. Rather, we would like to stimulate some thought and to use particularly some international models to look at how people are using trusts in other jurisdictions and to ask the question whether that same model works well here, or in some cases, maybe not. So this is really about ideas and some brainstorming. Okay, I think for most people, they know what a trust is, but just in case you don't, I will give the basic introduction to a trust. So with a trust, you have a settlor. In Czech, that person is called the zakladatel. It's for a family, it's usually the senior member of the family who is creating the trust for the benefit of their own family. But for a business, it could really be anybody. It could be any part of a business transaction. So the settlor, he or she signs some documents and creates a trust. And I have drawn it here as a cloud. And the reason I've drawn it as a cloud is because a trust is an entity which lacks legal personality. Instead, it is administered or managed by the trustees in Czech správce, who control and look after the trust, but they are not the owners of the trust. And the third group of people is the beneficiaries, or in Czech, and this is particularly important for business, the other possibility is that rather than having beneficiaries, the trust can exist for some purpose. the last step is that some assets of whatever kind are placed in the trust. What is important to understand, a key feature of why trusts are useful for business is that asset that is in the trust, it does not belong to the settlor. It does not belong to the trustee. It's managed by the trustee, but it does not belong to the trustee. And it does not belong, if there are any beneficiaries, it does not belong to them either. So that money or that asset is ring-fenced and protected from external attack. Okay, back 10 years ago, I started talking to people about business trusts in the Czech Republic, and many people told me, no, it doesn't make any sense in this jurisdiction. And to be honest, at the beginning, I believed them. There are a lot of reasons not to do it, or reasons that were given to me as reasons not to do with it. The first one is that we already have another way of solving that problem. And of course, the Czech Republic existed for many, many years without trust as a possibility. And so the problems that trusts are used to solve in other jurisdictions, the Czech legal profession found some other way of doing it. Trusts are new and untested. There's no judicial experience. The text doesn't work. Nobody understands it. And I think the truth is that means that people also are kind of admitting, I don't understand it. So those are all of the reasons given not to do it. We will go through today and decide if we think those reasons are valid. On the other hand, there are some good reasons to do it. Reasons to do it. Trusts are simple and flexible. I mentioned that Czech lawyers had found other ways of solving the problems that trusts solve in other jurisdictions. Those other ways are sometimes complicated and inflexible. So trust can sometimes offer a great, more simple, easier solution. Trusts have within them this beneficial ownership concept, in the sense that different people have different rights to different assets. So the trustee might be the manager of the assets in the trust, but the assets are being managed for the benefit of some different group of people. In Czech, we are also able to create trusts for purposes rather than for people. And the last, perhaps most important point, is that if you have a trust, you have a trustee, and a trustee is a watchdog. A trustee is there to protect the purpose or there to protect the investors. So it's a great system for protecting. Okay, I'll start with this nice quotation from Abraham Maslow, and he said, if the only tool you have is a hammer, you tend to see every problem as a nail. And I come from New Zealand. In New Zealand, we have a population of 4.5 million. We have 600,000 companies, and we have 500,000 trusts. So we have a lot of trusts. In the business environment, trusts are used a lot, in contrast to the Czech Republic. And we use trust to solve many problems. For example, corporate debt. By the way, I don't think this is a useful use of trust in the Czech Republic, but it's a nice example. One of my hobbies is I like to collect these old stock certificates, bond certificates from the past. They are beautiful things, beautifully printed, and many of them have a nice history behind them. This is quite a new one. It's only from the 1970s, and it's a debenture or corporate debt certificate from Phillips Petroleum, which was purchased by Lincoln Income Life Insurance Company. And this is a bit similar to a lot of what you see happening in the Czech Republic these days. Lincoln Life has lent some money to Phillips Petroleum. They got this nice certificate. And who is there to make sure that everybody is behaving themselves? So if we look closely at the bottom corner, you will see this reference to First National City Bank as trustee. And so this is showing us that this corporate debt was not structured as a contract, it's structured as a trust. And First National City Bank is there to protect the interest of Lincoln Life Insurance and all of the other lenders, and to make sure that Phillips Petroleum is doing what it's supposed to do, paying the interest and otherwise following the rules. That's an example. One of the reasons people gave us at the beginning for not doing using trust for business was what I call the trustee problem. Czech law says that any person with full legal capacity may be a trustee. That means physical people. A legal person, for example, a company, may be a trustee where provided by statute. And at the present time, there is only one place where that provision exists, and it is Section 11 of the Collective Investments Act, which means that some investment companies registered with Czech National Bank can be trustees. Currently, there is only one such company licensed with Czech National Bank. So it means that the reality is right now that for Czech Trust, you need a physical person as trustee, and that's generally quite inconsistent with the model of corporate trust, where it's a business relationship. How to solve that? One way is to use a licensed trustee. At the moment, there is only one, but it's a possibility. Second way to do it is to use what we call sock puppets. And what that is you have a corporate entity as the legal supervisor of the arrangement, and then that legal entity appoints individual people to act in the role of trustee, but the decision-making and the responsibility is still in the hands of the corporate entity. And that works. We've seen that work quite a few times. And the last way to do it is to use a trust that is established under the law of a different jurisdiction than the Czech Republic. And if you do that, the limitation requiring a physical person, of course, no longer applies, because most other jurisdictions allow legal people, legal persons, companies to be trustees. Second big problem is that the taxation of trusts in Czech Republic is inconsistent with corporate transactions. At least it looks like that at first glance. But the truth is that when you dig down and start to think about the transaction and how does it work and what are the consequences of that, sometimes the tax doesn't matter. And sometimes it does matter, but there are solutions. Not in every case, but in some cases. So tax, which seems like a horrible barrier, is not always a horrible barrier. So what I want to do now is I want to go through and just look at some international uses of trusts and think about whether those international uses of trust are valid here in the Czech Republic. And we start with investment funds. Now, if you look just to the right of the title, you will see there's one tick and a question mark. And that means that I think maybe this is something that could work in the Czech Republic. I'm not so sure. Internationally, we have the unit trust model. If you look at investment funds in New Zealand, most of them are structured as trusts. There is a trustee, there is an investment manager, and there are the investors who are in the role of beneficiaries of the trust. In Czech, most investment funds are not structured as trusts, because there was a different way of doing things in the past. However, the Collective Investment Act now specifically recognizes the possibility of using trusts, but for qualified investor funds only. And you'll see those references to legislation at the bottom of the slide. There is some specific provisions of the law talking about using trusts for investment funds, but as far as we know, nobody is. There may be one or two examples, but this is really a possibility which seems to not make a lot of sense in reality. I mentioned pension funds as well. Again, doesn't make sense in Czech. Pension funds are an investment fund run, for example, in New Zealand, very much as a democracy. So the trustees of the pension fund are often elected by the pensioners, by the investors in the fund, and you have a board of trustees. It's an interesting idea. I think there's some potential in Czech, but there's a few barriers and obstacles to overcome. Likewise, the next example is securitization. Trusts are used extensively in the rest of the world for securitization. Here is the example of securitized mortgages. So a bank has a hold of mortgages, and it wants to, if you like, get them off balance sheet. So it puts them in a trust and sells them or interest in those mortgages to external investors. It's possible here, but not, again, as far as I know, not being done. Still on one tick, but getting a bit warmer. Employee benefit schemes. Trusts around the world are used a lot for managing employee benefits. They are also used to own things like, let's say, company cottages or company holiday houses. One of the nice things is it takes these assets and these obligations off balance sheet. And I mentioned here limited or full democracy. It means that the decision making, the management, the control of these schemes can be actually done by the employees themselves, or by some combination of employees and company management, depending on how much control the company wants to retain. Not that exciting here because we have some specific rules about employee benefits in the Czech Income Tax Act, but more things are possible, including specifically what we call employee welfare schemes. And this is going beyond the basic employee benefit, and it's providing things that are not normally available. And specifically, we're talking about the situation where employees get cancer, or employees have heart attacks, or other very serious long-term problems. And employee welfare schemes are a great way to provide ongoing benefit to those employees outside the balance sheet of the company. So the company funds the trust, puts money in the trust. When somebody has a crisis, or even a family member has a crisis, the funds are there available to help them. And that's actually not expensive for employers, and employees see it as a very compelling and very positive benefit set. Once you do that, then there are many things that you can add on to the scheme to make it even more interesting. And there's a list of possible things there, which take us beyond the standard set of employee benefits that we see in this country. Okay, so now we're going to move from one tick to two ticks. These are things which do work, that people are actively using in this country. First obvious one is to use a trust as a business holding structure or as an asset holding structure. Why? Because the ownership of the things in the trust are no longer owned by individual people. They're not vulnerable to the decision-making or the vagaries of individual people. If people go bankrupt or get divorced, then things in a trust are protected. And rather than people, you have ownership by families or by groups. You can create rule-based ownership. In other words, the trustees who the administrators of the trust can make decisions based on a set of rules. And you can have still have shareholding, but it's not strictly defined in the same way as on the commercial register. So you can say this percentage of the company belongs to this person or this group, subject to certain conditions and rules and so on. And there are also some potential tax deferral benefits from doing it this way. Connected with that is communities. You may not recognize that house, but it's quite an important house. Usually I have a quiz at this point, but it's a webinar, so it's not so easy. But that is actually John Lennon's house that he grew up in as a child. And that house is owned by a trust. And it's owned by a trust on behalf of the community. So it's not owned by Mr. and Mrs. Lennon. It's not owned by some private investor. It's owned by the people of Liverpool, I believe. So trusts are really good where you want to have a community as an owner. A lot of community centers, village halls, swimming pools, sports centers in common law countries are owned by trusts. So you have the ownership being the community, or sometimes the ownership being society as a whole. So if you look at national monuments, again in the UK, for example, you will find that they are owned by something called the National Trust, which, as its name suggests, is a trust which exists for the benefit of the nation. So that's a great example of how trust can be used. Philanthropy, of course, and religion. Again, it's a similar concept as the society owner. In this case, the monasteries are the owners, or the communities are the owners, or because we have the ability to create purpose trusts, then there can be no owner. The owner can be just the concept or the purpose or the belief system. So you put the purpose ahead of the individuals. I have there a typical Catholic church, but of course it's all kinds of religion and all kinds of religious communities, so yeah, there's lots and lots of possibilities. Okay, I'm going to move from 2 ticks to 3 ticks. These are things that really work. Share option schemes, especially for startups and SMEs. You want to give your employees some equity in the business. The old way is that you would do very complicated contractual arrangements. There would be entries on the commercial register, a lot of bureaucracy, a lot of paperwork, and also some problems, because once you transfer the shares to your employee, you have lost control of those shares and you have lost the voting power in the general meeting. So a trust is a much softer model. You create the trust, you put the relevant shares into the trust, and the employees are the beneficiaries, but there's no need to make the entry beyond that first entry. There is no need to make any entries on the commercial register. And if things go wrong, if people break the rules, then you just remove them as a beneficiary. Voting share is an interesting idea where you separate the control over the AGM, the voting shares from the ownership. So it can be that one group of people are the owners of the shares, they get the dividends, they They get the benefit of being shareholders, but somebody else has the control of the company, or you can establish rules-based voting, which say, yes, the voting happens according to these rules and these principles. Last couple of slides, and now I'm on to 5 ticks. Okay, these are things that really work here, that are working, and are quite exciting. Consumer protection, especially. The old way of doing consumer protection, not to explain. Somebody pays money for something in advance of receiving the thing. Typical examples, a music festival. You buy your ticket now, the music festival is in October. You are going on holiday, you pay for your holiday now, but the holiday is in 3 months. Real estate, you buy your apartment off the plans, you pay your deposit now, but you don't get the apartment for 6 months, 1 year, whatever. The old way of doing it was to put this money, well, the old way was just that the recipient of the money would put the money in their bank account, and you crossed your fingers and hoped they didn't go bankrupt, because if they did, you lost the money. Better way of doing it, maybe, was to use escrow. The money goes into some separate escrow account, but if the provider goes bankrupt, that money is still, unfortunately, vulnerable to attack, because there was no valid transfer of the legal title. And because of that, that money can be clawed back into the insolvency of the provider. So again, money gone. No solution in Czech Republic until we had a trust. If the money is put into a trust, there is a valid transfer of legal title. So if the music festival goes bankrupt, that's not a problem, because your money is safe in the trust and can be returned to you. If your tour operator goes bankrupt, the same rules apply. And again, in the case of real estate, if the property developer goes bankrupt or does not deliver, or does not do what they said that they would do, there is a watchdog. There is a third party protecting your money. So that was all from me. As I said, really just ideas, some food for thought. I would like to now pass over to Sudheer Sharma, who is the Chief Executive of PTT in the UK. In Czech, we are doing this stuff now. We have more than 1 billion level business, but we are still a very small minnow compared to PTT in the UK, which is enormous. And their business is very much focused on this corporate escrow and travel side. So I will now be quiet and hand over to Sudheer to tell us more about that. Thank you.
Hi, James. Thank you very much. Hoping everybody can see me, and just bringing the slides up. Thank you for the introduction. We are actually very excited to be working in the Czech Republic. It's been a long haul. We've been working on the proposition for coming up to 3 years. And as James said, we started to achieve success in protecting travel funds in the corporate environment. And essentially what we do, if I may just talk about travel for the moment, is very straightforward. The consumer pays for their holiday. Those funds are placed into a trust account, and generally we will hold them until the consumer has come back from their holiday. The genesis of this arrangement started in the UK under the European Union directives in terms of protecting consumer funds. And in the UK, funds can be protected in one of 2 ways. Either they are protected by way of an insurance bond, which, by the way, could be a cash bond as well, or those funds are placed into the trust account. And since COVID, which I can't believe, happened 4 years ago in March 2020. It was found that trust accounts were far better vehicles for protecting consumer funds. By way of an example, we were able to support a major European airline and assisted them in refunding something in the order of 200 million euros of funds, each one of which were identified and returned to the individual consumers. Now, our expertise, as you can see from the slides, are these trust and escrow services, which we have now expanded into the non-travel sector as well. And as James said, these trust accounts have a beneficiary. The beneficiary in the UK is the Civil Aviation Authority, as an example, for flight packages. We have recently done a tie-up with a major franchising body in the UK, where these are now held for the franchising body. They, in turn, provide guarantees to the Civil Aviation Authority. So from PTT's point of view, as long as the purpose of the funds is clearly identified and defined, and the beneficiary is known, we will then adopt these instructions in terms of how these funds are to be managed. How do we work? We have a fantastic team of colleagues who are based in the UK. We are now gradually building a team in the Czech Republic. We have a team in Mauritius, a team in India, and we are looking at a couple of other European locations. Makes a great deal of sense to recruit colleagues for an individual country. It would have been very difficult to apply the English-trained team in the Czech Republic. We needed colleagues in the Czech Republic who spoke Czech, who were Czech, who understood the market better than we did, but they were trained up to operate under the rules we have designed. And the team is backed up by a bespoke system, which we call Imperium L, where we manage the funds of all of our clients at a granular level. And by that I mean, we have an individual system for every single client. Our system records all of the funds that have been collected and identified by the consumer who's traveling. And just to move across to the value, you can see a slide that says that we have processed nearly £3 billion of funds. In fact, I was having a conversation with James earlier today. This looks more like 5 billion this year. And each of those monies are broken down to the individual clients for whom we have separate trust accounts, separate trust deeds, separate arrangements. We do not mix funds, we do not mix clients, we do not mix systems, which makes it a really useful way of ensuring the protection of data and the management of data without it being compromised by any other information coming into that data. Our system Imperium L is home built. I have been involved in the trustee space since 2001, and my team, many of my team in the UK are coming up to 10 years. And we actually don't have anybody other than on the Czech side, where they're coming up to 1 year. We don't have anyone who's not worked for us at least 3 years. So a decent system built through experience and being continually developed through experience, backed up by a team that is well trained in terms of looking at the trust accounts, the exposure that may arise, the risks, and just generally having an understanding of each of our clients that we deal with. And we are very, very keen on training and empowering our people to be able to support clients. We do understand there's a degree of skepticism about trust accounts, and we can only overcome that by being very efficient, very effective, and very supportive. We, in fact, will provide data back to our clients because we reconcile every single trust account every day. Our system reconciles all of the funds every day. Once a week, we then carry out a further reconciliation at a senior level. And once a month, the whole proposition is reconciled client by client. And in the case of our Civil Aviation Authority trusts, we provide something in the order of 1,500 reports a year to the Civil Aviation Authority. All these reports are automated and come straight out of the system. We are active users of open banking in the UK, where our systems will pull banking transaction data straight out of the consumer system. And I think Kasia, if we could move to the next slide, please. In terms of the business verticals that we support, in the travel sector, as I've discussed, that's how we launched. We support tour operators, travel agents. We look after coach businesses. We look after cruising businesses. We also look after airlines. Not all of these trusts are regulated by the Civil Aviation Authority. In some cases, we will provide trust accounts for credit card companies, for merchant acquirers. So a merchant acquirer will not want to release all the funds on day one upon collection to the merchant. Those funds are placed with us and then are released to the merchant based on a set of rules agreed with the credit card acquiring business. The other aspect of our business, which is now growing very rapidly, is providing these solutions for insurance companies. So in the Czech Republic, we very specifically work directly with the insurance company who carry both the risk and provide the licensing for a tour operator to be able to sell package holidays in the Czech Republic. Why do these insurance companies and merchant acquirers want to work with us? It's because we are able to provide them with a granular breakdown of their risk. So every single day, they know what the value of the risk is and whether it fits in with what they had determined will be an acceptable risk profile. And this is a very rough example. The insurance company might turn around and say to us, we want you to hold 40% of all funds that have been collected and banked for a particular undertaking. Our system will actually record 100% of the value of the funds that have been banked, but we will then work out what the 40% is or what the 30% is. Whatever the requirement is, our system is, and that's what we mean by bespoke. We will code it up to work with the requirements of that time, of that particular risk, of that particular client, or whatever the requirement is of the beneficiary. Very quickly, Atoll Trust in the UK, the beneficiary of the Civil Aviation Authority. The acquirer trust, the beneficiary is the merchant acquirer. Insurance arrangements trusts, the beneficiary of the insurance company. So essentially, we like to work towards the diktat of a master, if I can call it. Makes for a very easy relationship because the client can't tell us what to do. The client understands what rules we operate to, and they work within those rules. We also work in other areas. We support gambling risk. So we work very closely with one particular European gambling regulator, where we manage the risk for the gambling regulator in respect of a number of the licenses they have granted. We don't actually hold any funds ourselves. The gambling regulator wants the data that we hold to understand what the risk is for that gambling merchant. And that risk is updated every single day. We also look after music festivals, which interestingly came out of COVID. As you can imagine, we had festivals, in fact, sporting events as well, that got cancelled. The funds had been received and were being held. And because they were in a trust account, our clients could reassure their clients, by the way, your money is safe. It hasn't been touched, hasn't been spent. When the music festival ends, We will check it, we will test it, and we'll release the money. We also provide these services to organizations that provide gift cards and vouchers. We tend generally to work with gift cards and vouchers companies that provide white label solutions for individual retailers. Same position again. We hold granular data which tells them what the exposure is on gift cards and vouchers. We've got white goods and furniture there. As you can well imagine, that also relates to goods being delivered well after the funds have been received. So we're quite versatile. We will develop with the client and with the beneficiary, if there is a beneficiary, the rules that are required to protect funds. We've been doing this for a long time, so we understand the need to work in a cooperative manner with the merchant or the client or the tour operator, so they don't feel like we are in any way making their life difficult or inconvenient. It's a set of rules. We work to those rules. We give as much support as we can to the party whose funds we are holding, and naturally their regulator or their beneficiary can also access those reports and that data to monitor what their risk is. Charities, as you can see, is at the bottom. You can imagine it's exactly the same situation. Effectively, we have a fiduciary obligation to carry out a role in a particular manner, and we have built a reputation of being trusted and value being placed upon what we say. We work very hard at this. Kesa, if you could then take us to the next slide, please. Benefits to stakeholders. The stakeholders are the business whose funds we are holding. The stakeholders are the beneficiary. The stakeholders are also the consumers as well. In essence, it could be anyone. James mentioned, I believe, the property sector. That also will have stakeholders. The stakeholders will be the contractors, the stakeholders will be the subcontractors. So these things are defined very early on, right at the beginning, and then everybody knows where they stand. We're able to provide real-time data. We can either be sent the data, or we can pull it by developing an API link for that merchant or client or travel company or whatever you want to call them. We have a system of dashboards, which obviously we have standard dashboards, and then we will develop dashboards that are specific to each organization. Cyber security is a very important consideration for us. We work very hard at it, but as you will all understand and know, that it is a dark science, it's a dark art, if I can call it, and all you can do is to rely on the best knowledge and the best experience that is out there, and you keep introducing good practice and good ideas into the system. I would like to think we have a good track record, because all the parties that work with us, the stakeholders that engage with us, I think they eventually find out that we are very helpful to them. We're very supportive, but clearly, professionally, we must do a proper job and an accurate job. We've got some quite nice recommendations on our website as to how we are viewed, how we are considered, and banks love working with us. We have a very significant presence with 2 major banks in the UK. Hopefully, we're developing a 3rd one. And James has actually got us 3 banks that we work with in the Czech Republic. So we have more banks in the Czech Republic with fewer clients than we have in the UK. But again, the banks get very comfortable with us when they start seeing how they work, what we do. And essentially, whilst we are trustees, if you think about it, we don't really acquire the power to control those funds. there's always a stakeholder involved in the disposition of the funds. So the Czech Republic, very specifically, PTT on its own signature cannot release any of the funds in the trust account. They have to be released jointly with the merchant, with the client or the tour operator, and with the insurance company. There are 3 parties involved before those funds go anywhere. And quite honestly, I like that idea. I don't want to control the money because that allows me to come on a call like this and say, guess what? We don't control your funds. In the UK, we do have arrangements where PTT can control the funds for certain travel companies, which don't involve flights. But in that situation, the travel company fails. Once they've failed, somebody has to step in and take charge of the funds. Again, bespoke arrangement, very carefully monitored, and we will actually work with a firm of independent accountants, even in that situation, which stops us from taking the funds again. Guess if you would go to the final slide, please. The benefit with the client is very straightforward. We need for them to acquire confidence in PTT. As I said, there's a great deal of reluctance in setting up trust accounts. We're very conscious of it. We're very aware of it. We know we have to build bridges. We have to get their confidence. And if I can put it in an English way, we don't want them to become resentful of us. Nothing destroys a relationship than a forced marriage. The other party is constantly looking for ways to divorce you. So you've got to be very good in that arrangement. So the other party goes, oh, okay, maybe it's not so bad. When it comes to, because we're able to track funds at a granular level, we're able to support our clients when it comes to making refunds, when they have cancellations. And as I said, during COVID, for a good year, all we did was refund money. If you can think about it, majority of our clients were travel or retail clients. And the flow of funds into trust accounts just stopped. But what we were able to do was when they had to make a refund, we were able to support the refund. We were able to provide them with the data and say, by the way, do you know, here's 1 million euros you need to refund. Here's £1 million you need to refund. Do you want to refund it? Are your clients asking for the money? Because the data we hold is very clean. I'm an accountant by training. I'd like to reconcile things. I like for us to have great clarity in what we are doing. Lastly, I would say that we are automating more and more and more. So the team that is managing, I mean, we're a team of nearly 35 people. The object is to make the team very experienced, very knowledgeable, and they operate the system as opposed to working within the system in terms of manual labor and manual effort and manual work. And I just want to add here, there is a bit of manual work involved. In situations where we are required to audit transactions, we do have access to client systems where we will examine third-party invoices. If a client comes to us and says, can you please release the money for the following bookings? Because, again, I'll go back to travel, all these people have returned. We won't accept that on being told that. We will actually go into the client system, pick a sample of transactions, and carry out an audit. You can imagine the level of trust our clients have with us that they do not feel uncomfortable in giving us this access. And we are able to see everything on their system. But that access is view only. So I hope in this brief presentation, and I promise you I could talk for hours about this subject. It's all I've done for nearly 25 years of my life. But I'm hoping in this brief presentation I can show you that we have a very sophisticated, but yet a very simple, workable proposition, one that wins the confidence of whoever comes and engages with us. And I would be very happy to answer any questions. And I do visit Prague from time to time. And if you want me to meet anybody, any of you, I'd be very happy to meet you and engage with you. Thank you very much. Over to you, James.
Thank you. Thank you, Sudheer. Thank you, James. I think we have a few questions, if I may just read them. The first one is quite interesting. I think that's the hot topic in everybody's mind. I don't know who wants to answer it. How is AI affecting your business? I don't know who wants to pick this up.
I think I'll take that one, Kessa. AI is a very interesting subject. Everybody has a different interpretation of what AI means. The only common thing is people know it's known as artificial intelligence. What it actually does and how it works for different businesses is very much in its nascency. It is still developing as a science, as an art. What it does mean for PTT is what I mentioned about automating more and more of the work we do and eliminating the ability to, the need to do a lot of manual effort. One of the solutions that we've been working on is actually going into our client system and for the validation of documentation to be carried out by the system. It's effectively automating the audit process. For our clients, it's also developing art. I'm also the chairman of the Travel and Tourism Board at our Institute of Chartered Accountants in the UK, and I was recently asked to find clients who could talk about artificial intelligence. I was amazed to find out that nobody was willing to talk about it. I got one of two answers. We're not there yet, or we prefer not to talk about what we are doing. So AI is interesting, and Kessa, perhaps I should be asked this question in another year's time.
Yeah, definitely. I think it's quite a hot topic and everybody's still looking into it and trying to understand what AI means. I've got a second question. I don't know who wants to pick this one. So can I ask if I've understood correctly, in the case of a tour operator, are you tracking each tour operator or each traveler?
We are tracking each traveler. So we will hold limited, I mean, there's GDPR to be taken into account. We will hold limited transactional data, but all of it is relevant to the funds collected. So we will hold data such as lead name on the booking reference number, the date of departure, the date of return, and the funds involved, and any other details we're required to hold by the beneficiary or that particular arrangement. And you can imagine if you went to white goods and furniture, we need to know what goods are involved in that particular order, when are they being shipped, when are they being delivered, what is the trigger point at which we're allowed to release the funds from the trust account. So it's an individual arrangement for every business, but within that, we track funds for every single party that pays into the trust account.
Yep. Thank you, Sudheer. We've got a last question. How about impact of cash flow of a company if the company doesn't have access to the funds?
So we are that was true in 2 or 3 years ago, where 100% of the funds were held in the trust account. Not true now. In the case of the Czech Republic, as an example, we don't hold all of the funds in the trust account. We hold a certain percentage that the insurer believes is sufficient to cover their risk. The rest of the funds are retained by the travel business. And here, even in the UK, interestingly, the Czech Republic solution is what we are now implementing in the UK. Our regulator has, without knowing what we are doing in the Czech Republic, accepted the Czech solution. And we will not be holding 100% of the funds in the trust account. So the days where all of the monies were held in the trust account pending performance are pretty much gone. That is not to say that we cannot have an arrangement where we hold 100% of the funds in the trust account. But that's very much down to the parties involved, what their agreement is, and what the risk perception is.
If I can just add something to that, looking specifically at the case of the Czech Republic and the tour operator business, actually it's positive. And the reason it's positive is the old model was that the insurance company would say to the tour operator, we want some cash from you as security for the insurance, which we're going to hold in our bank account, and we're going to base that on some estimate of your turnover. And what we have now for those tour operators is that the amount held is not based on an estimate. It's based on the current actual situation. And the current actual situation in January is that the amount of prepayments is not that high. But in June, prepayments are much higher. So the amount of money that needs to be held in January is much lower than it was in the good old days. And the second difference is that we are paying those tour operators interest on those bank accounts, on that money. So those tour operators are getting, for example, let's say in today's context, 5%, whereas in the good old days they were getting nothing. So I don't think you would find many of them complaining too much about losing the cash flow. Yes, they are, but it's better than it was before.
Yeah, definitely. I think that's very interesting to know, James. Thank you. And I think that's it. We don't have more questions, but if there's anything, you can always reach out to us and send your questions. So with that, we'll say thank you to everybody who's attending. And yeah, thank you, James. Thank you, Sudheer. Thanks for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.